Hello, everybody, and welcome into this latest edition of the Second City Hockey Ice Cold Podcast. My name is Adam Hess. I am your host once again on this beautiful Sunday afternoon filled with hockey, playoff hockey, which is just the best. And I'm joined again by my co-host Robert Zulinski. Robert, how you doing today?
Pretty good, man. We're going to Game 7. What can I say? I know Steve's not happy about it, but...
Yeah. Speaking of Steve, we are joined by the co-editor of Bleed in Blue, which is the Blues blog for Sports Illustrated's fan-sided network. His name is Steve McNeil. He's a good personal friend of mine. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Adam. How are you guys doing today?
Well, we can't complain because we've won 2 in a row. And so we're riding a little bit of a high on a Sunday. I was a little nervous about Game 5 and maybe more nervous about Game 6 just because I didn't want to lose it at home. But here we are now. So let's talk a little. Let's just get right into it. Let's talk about Games 4, 5, and 6 of this series. Game 4. We'll start with Game 4. The Blackhawks take a second period lead into the third period, and something that they hadn't done in more than 2 years was lose in regulation after leading a game. Steve, what do you think the Blues did so well in the third period of that Game 4 to get them that victory and send them home with a 3-1 advantage?
What they've been doing that has just been so well in the games that they have won is that they've been so resilient. They've been doing their comeback thing, the hashtag Roar Bacon. They've just been resilient at just coming back, and I think that they just kept the pedal to the metal in the third period, coming back from that deficit, just kind of didn't let anything get to them. And the impressive thing is that it wasn't just Vladimir Tarasenko. And that's one of the things that I've been looking for, is that more than Tarasenko stepping up and scoring. And, we got Jaden Schwartz getting in there. So that was the impressive thing. And then I think just the getting pucks on the net was the key to getting past you guys in that Game 4.
Mm-hmm. Robert, what do you think went wrong for the Blackhawks in that third period of Game 4?
The whole series has been the bounces. I mean, they're all also bad play by the Blackhawks in their own zone. The Blues really turn up their forecheck, and the Blackhawks defensemen, especially the bottom guys like Trevor Van Riemsdyk and Michael Roosevelt, didn't necessarily do well with that pressure on that to clear their own zone, and it turned into goals for Steen, I believe, where he stole it off a Van Riemsdyk pass, and that's sort of been the story for the Blackhawks all season. Their defensive depth, teams turn it up on them offensively, and they look like the Dallas Stars today. That's how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that Steen goal, which I think made the score 4-2 in that one, and that the Hawks, you could say, were building some pressure, only down by a goal at that time. And then Michael Roosevelt, we put it on Trevor Van Riemsdyk because his was the pass that was stolen, but Michael Roosevelt can't keep an Artemi Panarin pass in the zone. They try to make a play, TVR gets a pass stolen, all of a sudden the game is over. And I had my tweet, the ignition remix where the Blackhawks forgot to get a defenseman despite going all in at the deadline. That was, that moment I think was where it felt, pretty much doom and gloom because, Steve, you referenced how the Blues have been resilient in the past. The Blues have kind of broken down, when facing playoff adversity. And so instead they for them to come back, it just felt like, oh my gosh, these aren't the same Blues, and these definitely aren't the same Blackhawks. The Blackhawks could be screwed here. But let's talk a little bit about Game 5, because that featured the teams kind of going the other way, where the Blackhawks were able to it didn't really. The Blackhawks give up another second intermission lead for the Blues to tie it. The Blackhawks go with the 20-minute penalty kill. What went well for the Blues in that period, Steve, even if you say the same thing?
Again, I think it's just they just have this belief that nothing's going to stop them. I think it all kind of started earlier in the season against you guys when they were down, what was it, 4 or 5 to nothing, and all of a sudden came back. I think they just have this belief that no matter what happens in the second or first period, that they're going to be able to come back and get back into the game at the end. And I think that one of the things that is the addition of Troy Brouwer has really helped this team kind of mold into that kind of workman-like mentality when it comes to being behind in the game. And I think in that game specifically, they they just put their heads down and went to work and crazily got the 2 goals back. You know, it was amazing to see the team work so hard in that third period to get the game tied.
Yeah. You mentioned that 5-0 game. If I remember correctly, that was the Roar Bacon game, wasn't it?
Yeah,
That was the very first one.
that was it.
Where they misspelled the Instagram post or whatever, and that became the thing. I think it's kind of stupid.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, that's funny. But you know, Rob, I kind of mentioned it was a 20-minute penalty kill there for the Blackhawks in that third period. What did you see that went wrong for the Hawks there? Yeah.
I mean, they looked like they were out of gas, and it extended into the overtime. I was shocked that game even went double OT. The Blackhawks looked like they were running on fumes, like they had absolutely nothing left. The Blues, as I mentioned earlier, turn up their forecheck. Steve's talking about their resiliency, and really, I mean, Corey Crawford was the only reason this series extended past that game. Like it wasn't comforting to watch as a fan, but that's the nature of it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, I mentioned before we've seen the Blues break down so many times. I really think that them not winning that Game 5, even in overtime, could end up being the straw that breaks the camel's back. Steve, would you agree with that, where the Blues come back from a 2-goal deficit after the second period to tie the game up, and then they lose it in double overtime and have to come back to Chicago for a Game 6? Like, that's got to, when you have it basically in the palm of your hands after you win 2 in a row at the United Center, to then lose in that fashion despite that comeback, do you think that sort of, you know, as much as there's still games left, do you think that kind of broke the Blues down a little bit?
I can't speak exactly for the team, but I would say as a fan, it was deflating to go that entire game through the third period, the first period, the third period, and then the 2 overtime periods. It just felt like any moment we were going to see a puck go in the net for the Blues, and we were going to walk away with a series victory and get in 5 games. And then to see Patrick Kane circle around the back of the net almost untouched was mind-boggling, because the entire first 12 periods of the series we'd seen Patrick Kane, every time he had the puck, there was a Blues defenseman on top of him, you know, either whether they were stick checking him or putting him into the boards, you know, there was somebody on top of him, and in that moment, it was like the Blues just all of a sudden forgot that Patrick Kane was one of the best scorers in the NHL, and they're like, oh well, let's just give him some space and let him do his thing, and I think, you know, that could very well and be the straw that breaks the camel back, because nobody wanted to go back to Chicago. And as well as the Blues played in games 3 and 4, going back to Chicago was absolutely not going to be a good thing. You know, I don't know your guys' record at the UC, but goodness knows that you guys have had tough playoff victories over the past 5 years at the UC. Nobody wants to go have to play in probably the toughest arena in the NHL. Nobody wants to have to go back to there.
Beyond actually letting it get back to a Game 7 as being the most frustrating thing, what's gone wrong for the Blues in these past 2 games, Steve, in your mind?
Man, it's been a theme all season long. The Blues get a lead, and Ken Hitchcock goes into defense mode, and let's just protect the lead and let's try to hold on to our lead by playing safe and not, you know, pushing the issue too much, and just kind of play around with the puck here and there and not really push the issue. We'll just kind of protect the lead. That's been a problem all season long, not necessarily just in the second period, but in the third period as well. I can't tell you how many countless times during the second half of the season that they blew a 2 or 3 goal lead in the third period to wind up having the game tied and going to overtime or going to a shootout. It was a theme. They did it twice against Ottawa. I can't remember how many times they did it, but it was a theme there for a while, where they were constantly giving up late third period leads to teams, especially once the team got a 6-on-5 advantage. It was like you were almost expecting a goal. And I think that this has been a theme with Ken Hitchcock's teams over the past few years, because he just kind of lets up and says, let's play safe and let's not give away the lead. But in fact, when the Blues are playing well, the forecheck is strong. They're playing aggressively. They're putting pucks on net, and they're controlling action. That's when the Blues are doing well. But when they play safe and they play back in the zone and let the other team have the puck a little more often, then their defensive prowess is a little taken advantage of then.
So you talk about breaking down third period leads, but let's talk about Game 6 where the Blackhawks jump out to a lead. The Blues quickly are able to tie it back up, gain a 3-1 lead in 4 minutes. I think it was 4:45 or something like that. They took a 3-1 lead. And then after that first, the best thing that could have happened in that first period was the buzzer. The horn goes off, ends the period. We come to the second period, and all of a sudden the Blackhawks go on a 5-0 run and win the game 6-3. What happened to the Blues in that game?
Man, I was watching the game at work, and I just felt you didn't feel on cloud nine quite after the first period. You felt like, great, 3-1 lead. All right, let's keep the pedal in the metal. Let's keep going. Let's add another goal or two. Let's do this and let's get this over with. I felt a 3-1 lead wasn't necessarily safe, but it was a lead that we could deal with and a lead that we could potentially build upon. You had a goal from Tarasenko. You had a goal from Scotty Upshaw, of all people. You had a goal from Alex Pietrangelo. Everything kind of seemed to be going right in that first period. You just, as a fan, I felt like, all right, go into the second period. Let's play the same way. We've got an advantage. Let's keep going. And then I don't know what happened. They just fell asleep. I don't know if they just decided, all right, our lead is safe. No lead is safe against a team with Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews and Artemi Panarin. There's just no lead that is safe, and I think the Blackhawks have shown that throughout the past 5 or 6 years, and I don't know where the Blues have been, not paying attention. They've seen it happen themselves in the regular season. It was dumbfounding. It was truly an impressive show of just stupidity to just let that lead slip away.
And I mean, the tying goal scored by Trevor Van Riemsdyk, of all people, who fair enough, credit where it's due, he had one of his best games as a Blackhawk last night. I saw Robert tweeted that, but just, it was some of the most unlikely people scoring those goals. Artem Anisimov. Well, Anisimov's good, but then you had Trevor Van Riemsdyk, Dale Weiss scores a goal. Andrew Ladd, who hadn't scored at all, finally is able to cash in. It seemed. You mentioned the 3-1 lead being comfortable for you. Speaking for me, I thought, oh shit, here we go again. This is finally the end of it. So do you think that this could maybe be the straw that broke the camel's back? But as much as 5-1, or Game 5, losing that one sucks. Losing the 3-1 lead to then go down 5 to give up 5 unanswered goals there. Do you think that could end up being the real turning point of the series?
I think it could be. But with this team and the mindset, and I think I just have I don't trust it, but I kind of have a feeling where this group of players, Alex Pietrangelo, David Backes, Vladimir Tarasenko, Alex Steen, they just have got to feel like enough is enough. They gotta feel like enough is enough. It's time to simply do it. Gosh, we've been saying this team is talented for the past 5 seasons, and we just haven't seen it result in much of anything, aside from the 2012 San Jose series where they did away with them in 5 games, But other than that, it's been disappointment after disappointment, and I don't want to say it becomes routine for the players, just because I think some of it has to go on to Ken Hitchcock. But I think that enough is enough, and I think that this team is going to realize that in front of their fans at Scott Trade Center. I think it's time. I think it's time for this team to break through, and I think that they've shown enough in this series that they can win against the Blackhawks, and I think that eventually things are going to kind of come to a point to where the Hawks are going to be tired, you're essentially playing two defensemen, in your other four defensemen. 10 minutes a night it seems like. But I think that the Blues have what it takes to do it. It's just a matter of whether or not it's going to happen. I don't think it's necessarily a straw that breaks the camel's back. I think the only way that I see that this being a big deflating, Game 7 is as if, Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane just absolutely take over. I see that happening because Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane are big game players, but I think that the Blues do know that they have what it takes, and I think that everybody's been saying that this team's different, this team's different, this team's different. They do seem to have a different edge to them than years past, and they finally have a group of goal scorers. Robbie Fabry, Jaden Schwartz, Vladimir Tarasenko, all you name it. They all have the capability of putting the puck in the net, and I think if Tarasenko's ice time goes up and he's maybe paired with a certain Paul Stastny, we could see a different game. But we could also see the Blues revert to years past when they lost to the Wild, lost to the Hawks, lost to the Kings, and just simply put their heads down and fall asleep. But hopefully not.
Steve, you kind of just touched on it. Talk about this Tarasenko story, where he sort of just brushed off Ken Hitchcock when he wanted to talk to him about his ice time. What's the deal with that, and like how big of an issue has this been all season? Has this been something that's just arising now in the playoffs, where he isn't getting the proper amount of time? I mean, as the Blues' best player.
As far as I know, this is a new thing. He's been on the ice for. I mean, I've never heard him not having the ice time that he deserves. This is a new thing that I've kind of never heard about until the playoffs came about, and I think from what it sounds like, most of it has to do with the fact that Jori Lehtera is not a good center when it comes to face-offs. His face-offs draws are really bad, and he's just not good, especially if he's going up against Jonathan Toews. That's absolutely going to be a bad matchup for most centermen in the league. But he is Jori Lehtera is not a good centerman. He's very good with the puck. He very good passing, but he cannot win a face-off to save his life. And I think that part of that has to do with it. And I think that the issue with Tarasenko kind of, looking like a little frustrated with Ken Hitchcock, I think it was Tarasenko is he's got that edge, that most star players do. He's got that edge that he just has that drive to want to be on the ice at the most crucial times of the game, and he was disappointed with not getting onto the power play. And I think it is not. It's kind of. I don't want to say it's not much ado to be about nothing, because of the fact that he's not been on the ice much during the last two games, as opposed to the games 1 through 4 when he was on the ice for the majority of the game. But Vladimir Tarasenko is a different guy. He's very much a team player, very much a team first superstar. There's just this different aura around him when you hear him do an interview. Obviously, his English isn't the greatest, but he may come off as that just because his English isn't confident. But he has this aura of like, look, my stats don't matter. I just want to win a Stanley Cup, and he never really praises himself. And I got to think that I talked to some of my other hockey friends. If Tarasenko had a different mindset at times, that if he wasn't this team first guy, he could be a 50-goal scorer. But he does have this team first mentality, and at times he's very passive with the puck at times in the offensive zone. He likes to pass, get his teammates involved a lot, and I think that's a good thing at times, but it's a bad thing at times. So I think it's a little bit about much ado about nothing, but of course the media took advantage of the look on his face and made a big deal about it.
Well, I mean, you mentioned him not getting power play time. To me, he sort of seems like the kind of player that is such an offensive talent, and that he should be on the power play the full 2 minutes.
Absolutely.
Sort of a la Alex Ovechkin, where another Russian forward who just has a spot on the top circle of the power play, and he's there for 2 minutes. And it seems like that other side circle because lefty compared to righty, that other circle is sort of Tarasenko's spot. So do you think that he should just be on the power play and it should be Tarasenko and 4 other guys at all times?
Because the Blues are so deep in forwards, and I think that Tarasenko is a special talent. But if you have a line of Jaden Schwartz, Jori Lehtera, Vladimir Tarasenko, Alex Steen, Kevin Shattenkirk, that's normally their first line. But then you've got Paul Stastny, David Backes, and Robbie Fabry, and Alex Pietrangelo, and Colton Parayko, and then add in another forward or two. I think that they have 2 really good power play units, and I think that Tarasenko should probably be on there the majority of the time. But I don't want to go as far as to say he should be on there the full 2 minutes, because I mean if you put him on there most of the majority of the time for 2 minutes, you're going to leave out Robbie Fabry, who's a very, very good player in his own right.
Mm-hmm. Steve, what do you? I was going to say Rob, but I will go with you first. Steve, what do you think is the key for the Blues to win Game 7?
Aggressive forecheck. Absolutely have to play their game. They cannot go into a hole at all, a rut at all. They cannot play safe. They have to play aggressive all 60 minutes. They cannot go into, we have a lead, let's play back. They have to play aggressive the entire 60 minutes. Otherwise, I think the Hawks will see that, and they'll take advantage of it. And unless Brian Elliott stands on his head and shuts the Blackhawks out, it'll be a disappointing night for the Blues. They have to be aggressive. I think there should be a little bit of a line changes, a little bit, but Ken Hitchcock may opt to just keep things the way they are. But number one thing is aggressive. They have to be aggressive, and the defense has to be better. If they're not aggressive, nothing else is going to matter.
And then, Rob, I was going to ask you this, but then I wanted to go to Steve first. What do you think the key is for the Blackhawks in Game 7?
Playing off of Steve, have that killer instinct. You have the Blues on the ropes. You have their history in hand. And do what you did in Game 6. Use the stretch pass well. I think they've solved Elliott to an extent after he was stoning them early in the series. The Blackhawks aren't going to let Elliott necessarily beat them. Get shots on net. Be aggressive, because they can't do the same thing like Steve's been saying with the Blues. The Blackhawks don't have the defensive depth to sit back either. If they attack, it's going to go very well for them. And I would fully expect the Game 7 win if they're able to initiate their offense. They've been getting chances on Elliott, and it finally paid off in Game 6, and that's what they need to do tomorrow night.
Yeah, I agree with that. And since you kind of took mine, I'll just say I think that a key to the game is going to have to be the Blackhawks stars showing up, because Steve mentioned it earlier. Patrick Kane only has 1 goal in this series. It was the overtime. Jonathan Toews has no goals. Ladd finally just scored in Game 6. The Blackhawks' best players have to be their best players in Game 7, and that's typically when they show up. Even we talk about last year, the Western Conference Final. Jonathan Toews didn't have the best performance. Then Game 7, he shows up. He scores the first 2 goals of the game. And honestly, I think the key for both teams is going to be the first goal, because the team who scores the first goal tomorrow night is going to take control of that game. And I think that the team who scores first has won 5 of the games. Don't quote me on that, because I haven't kept track of that. I didn't look it up. But if that's the case, the first goal of tomorrow is going to be hugely important. So let's do our predictions. So I'll go to you first. Rob, who do you think wins Game 7? Let's do a score, too. So who wins, and what's the score?
The Blackhawks win Game 7 3-2. They have the big-time players. I don't know if they're showing up. Jonathan Toews is a guy that just ignites people, and leadership-wise, he's going to be a big game player tomorrow night. As Steve's saying, the Game 7 is typically where he's had his most legendary moments. You saw it against Vancouver with a shorthanded goal in the last 2 minutes to tie that game, send it to overtime, even though they eventually lost. You saw it last year where he set the tone against the Ducks. And I think he's going to do the same thing tomorrow night, and the Blackhawks win 3-2.
Steve?
Oh, I hate making predictions, but man, I guess I'll go with the Blues.
Not a surprise.
That's okay.
We're not going to say the Blues either.
Oh man, I guess I want to say I think that Brian Elliott is going to have a fantastic game. I won't go as far to say that he's going to shut him out, but I will say that it's going to be a 3-1 victory for the Blues. I think that Brian Elliott's going to stand on his head, and I think that Tarasenko is going to score at least one. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Backes and Pietrangelo wind up with a goal or two. I think that it's time for, a lot of people are going to be wanting to figure out whether or not Backes has what it takes in the playoffs, because I will tell you first, as a big David Backes fan, he's not coming back to St. Louis. There's no money for him. But I think that he's got to show what he's made of.
Okay, for me, I think that this is going to be a 5-3 Blackhawks win. Steve, you mentioned, that Elliott will step up. I think that Elliott, a career, I think, .897 save percentage in the playoffs before this series. I think that he's sort of regressing back. Rob mentioned they've kind of figured him out a little bit. I do think that's the case. I think the Blackhawks are going to be able to take advantage of him. And I mean, the Blues have a lot of star power. I think that, at this point, it almost feels like a Tarasenko goal is inevitable. So I think that Tarasenko will score. Pietrangelo has been good. Colton Parayko's been good, but I think the Hawks will come out on top. I think it'll be 5-3, and I think that as Blackhawks fans, we will be very encouraged by the play of the Blackhawks in Game 7. But who knows? These are just our predictions, and
Game 7s are crapshoots.
Yeah, exactly. Home ice doesn't matter, and kind of what's happened before that doesn't. As much as people want to talk about confidence going in, it doesn't matter all that much. So it is a crapshoot. So tomorrow night, one of us, hopefully it'll be two of us, but at least one of the three of us will be a happy camper after the game tomorrow night. So yeah, Steve, thanks for joining us. This again is Steve McNeil. He's co-editor of Bleed in Blue, a Fansided. You can follow Bleed in Blue on Twitter at BleedInBlueFS. You can follow Steve at @SMcNeil_87. Is that correct? Did I get that right? Yeah, cool. @SMcNeil_87 is his Twitter handle. Follow their work over there. Steve, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, guys. You guys have a great day.
You too. So, Rob, let's kind of move on here. We will talk about – Steve, you can just hang up.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll edit that out of the audio. Rob, let's move on. Let's talk about the Blackhawks. I kind of mentioned that I think the Blackhawks stars need to show up for Game 7. What has gone wrong? What do you think has gone wrong for Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane in this series? And I want to talk about them mostly just because I don't really want to be the salary guy that points out salary. But when you're paying two guys $21 million to be the two best players and they're not performing in games that you need to win, obviously, because in the playoffs every game's a must win. You want to see those two. So let's focus on those two, and then maybe we can spread out a little more broader. But what's up with Toews and Kane so far?
Well, at the start, the Blackhawks forward depth that they had or acquired wasn't playing well, so the Blues were able to key in on them, and it's not necessarily like they weren't creating chances either, Adam. I mean, they were all over the ice in the first few games. Not Game 5, they only had 2 shots going in the third period, but other than that, I mean, they were still creating. The past few games, you've seen them come alive. Kane saved their season in Game 5. Last night, Toews dominated on both ends of the ice. He was the best best skater on the ice. It's not even a question to me, other than Richard Panik, which I'm sure we'll get to. And it's coming through. That's how Toews influences the game. And then you saw Kane factor in offensively. I don't know if that's necessarily been slow starting, because again, the Blackhawks are notorious slow starters in playoff series. But teams just were able to key in on them, and it's different now with how Quenneville's mastered his lineup and changed things around.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have just kind of mentioned that sometimes the bounces don't go your way,
the bounces
right, and in a lot of ways the bounces have not gone that way for the Blackhawks. And I mean, Jonathan Toews has had. I mentioned last week that I don't think that the Ladd Toews host line had actually gotten a shot on goal because everything was hitting legs. they're just struggling a little bit. I do think that they're, going nuclear and putting Kane and Tays together has been fantastic. That line has looked revitalized. And Steve kind of talked about how they're, the Blues are trying to kind of keep Tarasenko away from Tays, keep him away from Duncan Keith. That's encouraging too. And when you can have that impact while also having your best offensive player, one of the best in the NHL, and Patrick Kane on that line, that's obviously, that's apples. And so to have that, that's perfect. And I just think that I truly think that the Blackhawks are going to get a goal from Jonathan Tays in Game 7. He is too much of a big game player to not show up. And I don't want to say not show up, like he can show up in other ways, but he's going to have an impact on the score sheet tomorrow. And I think, for Game 6, I actually predicted that he would get 2 goals. I don't know if people saw that on Twitter. I thought the Blackhawks were going to win 5-3 and Tays would have 2 goals. I was pretty close. They won 6-3. Tays did not have any goals, but I think he will get at least one tomorrow night.
You know what's the encouraging thing? Because when we were talking with Steve, I mentioned how it seemed like at the end of Game 5 they seemed out of gas. Q has worked around his lines again, masterfully worked around his lines again. For all the criticism he gets with the people he puts in the lineup, his line blender has just worked to perfection. Richard Panik has been a revelation. The Lad Kruger hosts the line has been fantastic. And the Blackhawks look like that they finally hit that playoff switch in that gear. Last night I was just a 1-game sample, but that did not look like a team that was running on fumes. That did not for that 4-minute stretch. I think Satchel mentioned it on Twitter. It was kind of like Game 4 against the Ducks last year. But after that, they dominated a really good Blues team. And that bodes well, Adam. I mean, that bodes really well for should they win Game 7 and beyond. I have to say that because I know the playoffs aren't a momentum thing where it carries over necessarily from game to game, but they have to feel incredibly confident with how this lineup is set up now.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that one thing that has impressed me so much, for as much as he struggled early on, and a lot of people were kind of giving him flack. Teuvo Teravainen, now that he's got new line mates in Panarin and Anisimov.
Now he's in the wing.
Now he's back on the wing. Like, he has looked great, and that line has looked great. They struggled a little bit possession-wise in Game 5, but in Game 6, they were 3 of the Hawks' best forwards. I think they were the best line overall in terms of Corsi, and they look like they have chemistry. And people kind of talk about how Teuvo is kind of like another Patrick Kane. Maybe not necessarily the same scoring touch, but the similar style of play. And he kind of looks like he has that same kind of rapport with Panarin, where they kind of have that chemistry. And with Anisimov in the middle, that line is so similar. Yeah, that maybe the scoring punch of Kane is gone, but you have Teuvo on that line. The one thing I really need to see from Teuvo, if I don't know if you agree with this, but I need to see him shoot the puck more. I was trying to think of a clever way to say this on Twitter, but it's too wordy. But I was going to say, if I was Teuvo Teravainen, I would spend my whole summer making 2-on-1 rushes, but with a piece of glass between me and the other guy. So if I tried to pass it to him, it wouldn't get through, and I would have to shoot the puck every damn time.
That's really wordy.
It's really wordy. I couldn't think of a way to tweet it, but he just needs to work on, I feel like he has been on 2-on-1s a couple times in this playoffs, and he's passing off instead of taking shots when, the goalie, yes, is probably more set, but when you're on a 2-on-1 and you keep passing, eventually the goalie's going to go, he's passing anyway. So look him off and take a shot. I just feel like Teuvo doesn't do that. I don't know if it's a confidence thing, but I think he's looked very good. And like you said, the lineup changes have been phenomenal.
It's unbelievable, Adam. This guy with the mustache, just continually what he's able to do to push just the exact right buttons. The Blackhawks, and I know you will agree, looked dead in the water even after winning Game 5. And they looked like a Stanley Cup championship team last night with 2 defensemen. Adam, because of the lineup changes he did.
I don't think I'd agree that they looked like
they looked pretty good. Sorry.
And I don't want to say in Game 6. After Game 5, I don't think they looked dead in the water. I felt freaking good after Game 5, especially because the way that they did sort of get knocked down by sitting back and trying to kill a 20-minute penalty in that third period. that was discouraging. And then to go to overtime and fight and go to double overtime and continue to fight and come out on a win, I thought, okay, that's a good win. And that's a good win for the Blackhawks. That's a bad loss for the Blues. And that is big. And then going into Game 6, like you said, they looked like a Stanley Cup contender last night. Not for the first period, but for the second 2 periods, they looked like the best damn team in the NHL.
That was the best period they've played in 7 months of hockey, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. That second period was probably their best month, their best period of hockey this season. At least in the past, at least in the calendar year of 2016.
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. And let's talk about Panic though. Panic at the Disco, panicking all around. Everybody's praising him. He's really coming into his own. I mean, Adam, this looks like another Michael Frolik. This looks like a guy that's selling out for shots. A great guy, great defender, great two-way forward. He was all over the ice last night.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal. And I mean, the thing is, you even saw it in Game 2, I think, right away, where Brandon Mashinter plays in Game 1. Next game, Panic draws in for him, or Panik. I think it's Panik, but
it's Panik.
Panik draws in for him. And I mean, I think there was 3 times in that game where Panik made plays that I thought Brandon Mashinter couldn't do that to save his life. If you had a gun to Brandon Mashinter's head, he couldn't do what Panik just did. And one of them was just like a simple race to the puck, where he made a nice move around a guy, stopped hard at the boards, and won the puck at the boards. Brandon Mashinter never would have won that play. His idea would have been hit. Panik thought puck, and he went after the puck and won it. And he's been phenomenal. And last night, I mean, oh my gosh, he was a force of nature. I mean, everyone on Twitter was just talking about Richard Panik and making Dick Panik jokes, which were lots of fun. I had a good one. I thought Dick Panik going hard tonight was pretty good. Thank you very much.
Tom Pauly from Cheer the Anthem had one where Dick Panik is just all hanging out.
Yeah, letting it all hang out. That was a good one too.
That was a really good one. To me, the best illustration of the kinds of things that he does that's made this team look so much better is there was one play where I think the Blues had a 2-on-1 rush. I'm not sure who the Blues were. And he extends fully, dives for it to break up the rush and make it a completely harmless play defensively. And then on TVR's goal, just the way to receive that pass all the way from the other end of the ice from Nicholas Hjalmarsson, shield away from I think it was Alex Pietrangelo, and just deftly handed off to Taves, who then set up TVR. Like, that was ridiculously athletic. I don't think people talk enough about that.
Yeah, and then Taves, I think it was Taves that beat Pietrangelo and then made the play to TVR, but the play by Panik there was phenomenal too. The play that sticks out, I mean, I don't want to say the most, but hugely in my mind, was late in that game, because late in the game, the Blues were coming. Absolutely. I mean, at one point I said that, we need more offense. And Richard Panik's on a breakaway, and this little lob pass by Duncan Keith caught him right at the blue line. And I mean, Richard Panik, I honestly, I don't think that he could do it again if he tried. But I shouldn't say that. He probably could.
He probably absolutely
he probably could. But he turns around, catches the puck, stays onside, keeps the puck, turns back around, goes in on a mini breakaway, draws a hooking penalty on Jay Bouwmeester. Maybe it could have been a penalty shot, but it ends up being a power play, and that power play led to the Hawks' 5th goal after they did a little bit of dicking around, and that really sealed the deal, and that is when we knew that we were going to Game 7, and it all was set up. Even though he wasn't on that power play, didn't factor into that goal, it was set up because of a great, great play by Richard Panik on that zone entry to stay on sides. And then the play you mentioned before where he laid out and broke up that play, if you think about it, I mean, just kind of go back, he saved the asses of Patrick Kane and Duncan Keith on that play, because Patrick Kane sent the pass that was intercepted by Pietrangelo, then Keith got burned by Pietrangelo at the blue line, and Panik came back and saved both of their asses. When you're coming back and you're saving 2 of the 3 most important players' asses, you are making yourself an important player, and that's what he's been able to do.
If we're getting this kind of panic, again, I can't say much to the fact that Mike Babcock, coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, doesn't really make many mistakes. But man, the Leafs look. I know they weren't trying necessarily to win this year, but they look stupid with this. Like, for some of the moves that Stan made, for example, at the deadline, we talked about last week how they weren't the best, like trading Philip Deneau. But Richard Panik was an underrated move. The Blackhawks finally got value for Jeremy Moore in a sense in the second trade, I think, trade of him. And this could pan out to be one of those underrated kinds of things that eventually, pays off in June.
Right, and I mean, you mentioned it. Getting value for Jeremy Morin in the form of Richard Panik is huge because Richard Panik is still, I think he's still only 24, maybe he's turned 25, but still young, got years left in him, obviously proven to be a very strong depth player, has sort of, I don't want to say scoring touch because he didn't score a lot of goals, but has the game where you feel comfortable with him as a third-line winger, especially if he's playing with a guy like Teuvo Teravainen, or if Nick Schmaltz comes up, he has, kind of the size to stick with them, the two-way game to stick with them, can finish off plays when need be. Like, he is a guy that is comfortable. And to get, Jeremy Morin had clearly no more future in Chicago. He had been traded from Chicago, then back to Chicago, stuffed in the minor leagues, and then traded to Toronto. The poor guy then got traded from Toronto to San Jose. That's a whole other story. But Richard Panik, like you said, a great depth addition. I hope that the Hawks can get him re-signed for one or two more years as a depth player.
I feel like they kind of will. They recognize that they're going to need someone like him. It'll be more akin to the deal they gave Andrew Desjardins, except Panik's a better player than Desjardins, and especially with the kinds of transitions they'll have to make after whenever this season ends. He's going to be incredibly valuable for them. I hope they get signed for a mil, and I think there's incentive for him to stay after he's finally found a place where he's succeeding and winning and has a role like this,
Yeah. And, again, and I don't know, this isn't a Leafs podcast, obviously. People kind of hating on the Leafs, and you mentioned that they wanted to, they were trying to lose. But at the same time, with just a quick, I'm not trying to be like an apologist, but to me, the way I look at it is the Leafs didn't need guys like Richard Panik to be depth players. They needed their 23 and 24-year-old guys to look like they're going to be future stars. And obviously, Richard Panik isn't that. So losing him for Jeremy Morin isn't really a big deal. Would he be a valuable depth player for them in the future? Sure. But honestly, I'm more happy that he's here than anything. So I don't really feel bad for the Leafs. But just all the flack that they were catching, like, oh, he wasn't good enough for the Leafs, like, that doesn't really matter. Richard Panik is good enough to play for the Blackhawks. Let's focus on where he is now, because I felt like, I mean, as much as it's funny to laugh at the Leafs, I felt like that was just kind of like cherry picking and kind of cheap. Like, who cares? The Leafs are in a different place. He wouldn't be effective depth for them because they don't need effective depth.
You're too nice, Adam. What about all the fans that still come after the Blackhawks for Trevor Daley and Patrick Sharp? You're too nice. Come on.
And you know what?
That's with everything, dude. Come on.
That's fine. Whatever. I like to believe that I am a genuinely nice person, so I'll be too nice. I like to be I have a little Twitter troll in me, so that's where my mean streak comes out sometimes. But you mentioned earlier, let's talk a little bit about Joel Quenneville, because as much as we don't like the line blender sometimes, as much as we don't like his lineup decisions, I struggle to think of a coach who makes in-game adjustments to his lineup more effectively than Joel Quenneville, and who is unafraid to look at those, who's unafraid to look at the blender and say, you know what, that didn't work. I'm going to blend again, and we're going to switch it up. And he's unafraid to experiment with things, see if they work, and if they don't, go back to what happened before, try something new. And I think that's so welcome for the Blackhawks. What's your take on that? And I think we're kind of due for some Q praise after last week, so let's do a little bit of Q praise if you don't mind.
It's masterful, Adam. It's masterful. He knows how to push all the right buttons of a veteran squad that should like we said, maybe isn't always clicking on all cylinders. He knows, and it's a credit to the Blackhawks too, because they like it and they embrace it. Like, no one's pouting about losing roles. No one's pouting about moving about the lineup. Everybody willfully changes around with their chemistry. It's frightening. It's frightening for other teams, frankly, to see that. And it's not even just the lineup changes; it's how he matches lines as well. We've talked about in the past year so often about how he just coached circles around Bruce Boudreau in Game 6 and Game 7, and how he used his lines, and he's doing it again. You saw from the second period on, Vladimir Tarasenko was being chased by Keith and Taves every time he was on the ice. After the space, of course, he had in the first period, but Tarasenko's not a guy you can necessarily limit so well, and he did that last night and Q did that last night to a T. And I'm not sure how many coaches can do that.
Yeah, and I think one thing that is so big for him is I think he manages a room so well. People talk about a lot of times how, with in baseball, they call him the manager instead of the coach because you do manage more. You manage personalities. I think that's one thing Joel Quenneville does so well is he knows kind of. I can't speak. I've never been in that locker room, but from the outside, it looks like he just knows what the team needs. He knows what changes need to be made. He knows how to the idea to kind of, to switch up Teuvo Teravainen, who had been deliberately moved to the third line center role and players brought onto the squad for him to go there to say, you know what, this isn't working. Let's put you back at wing, and to move Marcus Kruger up to a third line center and say, hey, we're going to need a little more offense from you, and play him with Ladd and Hossa. And that Ladd Hossa Kruger line has been so good in terms of being a good shutdown defensive line that can come back at you and punch you in the face with offense. And that's huge. And to know that Richard Panik is going to fit in well with Taze and Kane, I should say, and that's going to work and that he's going to be able to shine in that role. I think he outshined both of those players in Game 6, and that kind of thing is phenomenal. And finally, it took forever, so we can complain about that, but finally saying, hey, it's time to put Keith and Seabrook back together, that is huge. And being able to do that after last week, I railed, why can't he do it when it seems so obvious? To finally do it and it's working out well. Seabrook has not looked bad in Games 5 and 6, in my opinion. I think he's looked better. He's still a little slow, but he has looked better. Duncan Keith has looked good. TVR playing with Hjalmarsson, like I mentioned last week, that's a very good play, or a very good pair. In terms of possession, they looked good last night. TVR had one of his best games, and just his ability to know when it's time to switch things up, and not just switch things up, but to switch things up and make effective changes that make sense and make an impact is so incredible to me. And I know, we've talked, I think it was our very first podcast, we talked about why does Mike Babcock get the best coach rap in the NHL. I think Babcock kind of can adjust in-game things as well, but I think Quenneville just does it so well, and he knows his players well enough to know, okay, I can make this change and see if it works, and if it doesn't work, we can go back and nothing will be worse off.
And he trusts them, and that trust goes both ways. Sometimes he over-trusts them with putting guys like Mash in, but then on the opposite end, like you're saying, how the people are moving up and down the lineup, he trusts that these guys can handle that role. TVR has gotten wrecked all season, and I talked about it on Twitter. Last night's game is to me kind of what QC has seen in TVR as to the reason that he's been playing. Maybe the Blackhawks don't necessarily have any better options, but I haven't seen TVR ever use his stick like that last night. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the kind of positioning that he had last night the entire year. And maybe when we rack on Q all the time, maybe stay with me here. He knows what he's doing to an extent,
Yeah.
He's a legendary coach. If he's putting TVR out there, maybe it's because there's no options, but maybe it's also because he sees that there's actually some skill here. That TVR is a decent passer in the offensive zone. That TVR does have some decent defensive instinct. It just needs to be more consistent, and you saw it last night. And so he trusts his guys, and it pays off in that sense. Mm-hmm. They'll handle that role. And it also speaks to the leadership the Blackhawks have in the locker room, too. Would this work? Would this kind of stuff say, and I don't want to rack up too much on, say, the Ducks or something, but would this work with the Ducks with Getzlaf and Perry as your, core guys? I'm not going to say yes or no, but, you can make your own inferences based off how that team has collapsed in the postseason in recent years. When you have a guy like Jonathan Taves in the corporate locker room, guys like Keith, guys like Seabrook, sort of setting the tone, sort of having everybody set in line and just embracing the changes that Q makes, that's why there's so much success here. That's why there's that foundation here, and that's why Quenneville can just really mess around so much.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned how sometimes the overtrust. I think that is sometimes what frustrates fans, is that we look at it and we think, okay, TVR has like he's so obviously bad with Brent Seabrook. Like that pair is so obviously bad. Why does Q stick with it? Like you said, maybe he sees something that he thinks that's a positive, that, if that positive can happen more often, that outweighs the negative. Maybe he sees that and we don't see it as much. Obviously, like I mentioned, he knows those players. As fans who aren't in that room, we don't know the players as much, definitely not much as he knows them, and certainly not to an extent to be able to make lineup decisions for the team. We think, as fans, we kind of project how we want to see lineups, but we do that solely off of what we see as a player's game. When you're a coach and you are so knowledgeable, like Joe Quenneville, the second most winningest coach in NHL history, like you have like an edge over other people. And I think one of the reasons he's able to coach circles around guys like Ken Hitchcock and Bruce Boudreau is because they look at that and they go, God, how the hell does he do that? Like, how does he switch his lineup? How does he go down 3-1?
No one else really does that in the league. No one else really line matches or does that blender like at all.
How does he switch his lineup so heavily? How does he take, Andrew Ladd and Marian Hossa from the top line and put them on the third line and switch that up and it works? Like, how does he know? And I think some coaches are almost jealous of that, where they can go, you know what, like, I don't know that I could do that. I don't know that I would be able to trust Richard Panik to play with my two best players. But Joe Quenneville sees it and he trusts him and it works out. And I think that's just so incredible that Quenneville can do that. And again, second winningest coach in NHL history. Like, again, you mentioned it. Maybe he knows what he's doing. And I think, again, I don't think that it's wrong to criticize him, to question his decisions. I think that as fans, like I mentioned, that's healthy. It's good to look at that and think, okay, why is he doing that? Because that means you're invested and you have an opinion and you've been able to be informed. But I just think that at the same time, being able to kind of humble ourselves and go, you know what, Joe Quenneville is the coach of this team. And if that's what he thinks is best, then, that's probably what's best. And again, at the end of the day, last week, even with all my railing against Quenneville that I did, I still said, you know what, at the same time, I don't hate Joel Quenneville, and I still think that he's one of the best coaches in the NHL. And I don't think there's a coach in the NHL I'd rather have coaching this team. I don't even think that. I don't even think I would want Mike Babcock coaching the Blackhawks. I would not trade Quenneville for Babcock, because Quenneville has been so effective here. And as much as he can be frustrating, and as much as we joke about blenders and dog houses, that he's effective and he gets shit done, and that is what you need from a head coach.
At this point, I almost never want him to not be head coach, because I've gotten so used to the blender. I've gotten so used to the line matching in crucial times in the playoff series that whenever he's not coach anymore, and if the Blackhawks are still good and they're not adjusting, like, I will actively, like, I feel like I'll actively rail on it, like, why isn't he doing it like Hugh used to? Like, I'll root for the good old days, like. He's brilliant. I mean, there's not much more else to say. He's brilliant.
Yeah, he's brilliant. I'm sure a certain amount of credit goes to his assistant coaches, who are he's been with Mike Kitchen now for years. Kevin Dineen has been here for 2 years now. Those guys are good coaches too, and that whole coaching staff is good. And honestly, again, it's like you said, it's almost to the point where we can complain about Joe Quenneville as much as we want, and he is frustrating sometimes, but I don't know what I don't know. Again, I wouldn't want anybody else coaching the Blackhawks, and I don't know if when Joe Quenneville retires, that will be a sad day. That will be a very sad day in Blackhawks, and just in the Blackhawks world. And I was, I think last week when the Kobe Bryant stuff was happening, I was like, this is making me emotional just thinking about Jonathan Tate retiring. But the same kind of thing can be said for Joel Quenneville, where he is such a good coach that when he is no longer coach of the Blackhawks, it's going to be very sad for us.
Let's not talk about that day, though. Let's not talk about that day.
Yeah, because let's live in the now. We still have a Game 7 and hopefully more hockey. Speaking of more hockey, let's talk a little bit around the NHL.
Hold on. We did have one Twitter question. Twitter question. Who gets the game-winning goal tomorrow? From at @RSchultz20. Who gets the game? That's the one we had. Who gets the game-winning goal tomorrow, Adam?
Taves.
He's going to set the.
I said I think he gets a goal tomorrow. I think it'll be the game winner.
I think he gets the first, and he probably pots another, and that will be enough. I don't think I'm being too arrogant in saying that. These are like Game 7 is going to be what people remember Jonathan Toews for, like legendary moments and setting the tone for his team and just like the big plays he made. People will always remember that shorthanded goal against the Canucks, and they'll remember how just on fire he came out against the Ducks with that crazy shot on the power play, beautiful shot in a sense. And then the one where he redirected to Nicholas Hjalmarsson, or not redirected, knocked in a shot off of a Nicholas Hjalmarsson shot from the point. Like, Game 7 is where Taves balls, and I have to agree. But let's move on from our captain.
Okay, so now let's talk a little bit of around the NHL. We have now 4 series, that have come to a close around the NHL. We have seen the San Jose Sharks take down the Los Angeles Kings in 5 games. Today, the Stars finished out the Wild in 6. Today, the Capitals finished out the Flyers in 6. And yesterday, we saw the Penguins close out the Rangers in 5. So we have 2 first-round we have 1 second-round matchup set, I should say. And I also forgot that there's 5 because the Lightning have already eliminated the Red Wings. So 5 series. So there's only 3 left going. We have 1 with East round matchup set up, or Eastern Conference second round matchup set up. I'm stumbling here. Jeez. Eastern Conference second round matchup set up between the Penguins and the Capitals. I mean, I think those 2 teams are pretty obviously the class of the Eastern Conference. What are you looking? That looks like a fun series to me. What are you looking for in that series?
See if the Caps can get over their playoff demons, and it's not going to be easy against arguably the hottest team in the Eastern Conference. But if the Caps are on this mission that they've been talking about all year and leading the league in regular season points, like, this will be their tough test, because they're probably the Eastern Conference Final will probably be a casual walk in the park compared to what that series is going to be. It might be the best series of the second round if it lives up to the hype of Crosby Ovechkin Part 2, which if it was of the rivalry, which if it was such a great rivalry, wouldn't have been the second time they're meeting, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I'm going to be curious to see how the Caps respond. I'm going to be curious because they didn't look necessarily all that impressive against the Flyers, while the Penguins, after a disastrous Game 2, absolutely railed a bad Rangers team, as they should. The Caps weren't the best Corsi team. They weren't the best possession team. They relied a little bit too much on Holtby during the Philadelphia series. And if they have to do that against the Penguins, Adam Yost, you might be right, man.
Hey, you know what? I'm fine with being called Adam Yost at this point. I've accepted it.
Adam is Adam Yost because he loves the Penguins, everybody. Or no,
I don't love the Penguins. I'm just very high on the Penguins.
Okay, well, Adam is Adam Yost because he's very high on the Penguins. Like Travis Yost is high on the Ducks. That's not to knock Travis or anything. We again think he's a great writer. It's just a running joke between Adam and I.
Hey, I'm fine with that. Travis, I think, is a good writer. He works at TSN, so if I can work at TSN, I'm okay with that. But I think I think that is honestly maybe a matchup of the 2 best teams in the playoffs. You know, you kind of mentioned that the Capitals haven't been the best Corsi team, but just those 2 teams coming into the playoffs are 2 of the best in the NHL, maybe the 2 best. I think either one of those teams ends up in the Stanley Cup final, no matter who they're playing in the West. They are a threat to win it, and maybe the favorite to win it. So I think that the Eastern Conference champion comes out of that one. And I think that, my prediction, I don't know if you want to make predictions, but I've already predicted today that I think the Penguins will win that series in 6. Do you want to make a prediction?
Caps in 7. I think it's their year to at least get to the final and then lose to the Blackhawks.
That's a fair prediction. That's a good take. And then let's talk about the San Jose Sharks, who eliminated the Los Angeles Kings. I don't want to say it was a shocker because the Sharks are obviously a very good team. I picked the Kings to win in 7. I think you picked the Kings to win in 6. Literally every single person on our Second City Hockey staff picked the Kings to win. So Second City Hockey is taking a big L on that one. But I don't know how much you've watched of those games, but what do you think has gone well for the Sharks?
They dominate on the power play, and they just severely limited they abused Drew Doughty, who for some reason Daryl Sutter paired with Rob Scuderi. So not only did Doughty have to babysit Scuderi, but he also had to deal with just an onslaught of Joe Pavelski, Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau just coming in waves and waves and waves. And you saw in the series result, the Sharks, I mean, other than game 3, which I could argue that the Sharks played very well as well, they just ran out Los Angeles, and I'm not sure if it's because ran out the Kings because I'm not sure if it's because there was no defensive depth with LA, because they really their defensive situation might be worse than the Blackhawks for all of that. For everything that's going on there, they're playing a lot of older guys. They were playing a lot of older guys too. Vinny Lecavalier, Scuderi, as I mentioned. Luke Schenn isn't older, but he's not exactly useful in your lineup. And it finally came back to bite them. I mean, the Sharks, I don't know if they're the Western Conference favorite or anything, but they look like a juggernaut in just completely dismantling a team that probably was everybody's like first or second Stanley Cup pick.
Yeah, I think what's most impressive to me about the Sharks winning that series is that they won all 3 games at the Staples Center. They did not have home ice in that series.
Well, they were the best road team in the league during the regular.
Yeah, they were the best road team in the league. That's true, and I think I guess what I mean is that's like what impresses me the most about the team, about that team, I should say, is that just they're so good on the road. They won games 1 and 2 at the Staples Center, closed it out at game 5 at the Staples Center. To them, home ice does not matter, and that is a powerful attribute to have for a team. When you don't need to be at home and give your coach matchup advantage and have your own fans behind you, when you can feed off negative energy or feed off energy that the fans are trying to give to your opponent, that is obviously a huge advantage. And to me, I don't care who comes out of the Anaheim-Nashville series. It's 3-2 right now. The Ducks have the lead, so I'm just going to assume that the Predators win that in 7. If we've learned anything about the Predators or about the Ducks recently, but I think that the Sharks, whoever wins that series, I think the Sharks beats them. I'm not going to say how many games because I don't know the matchup what's going to be, but I think that the Sharks will be the Pacific's representation in the Western Conference Final, and very well could be the Western Conference favorite, especially if the Hawks are able to knock out the Blues, who I think were probably the best odds-on favorite in the Central Division. So yeah, I think the Sharks could end up being the West favorite.
We'll see.
Yeah, let's talk about the series that impacts the Blackhawks the most, though, which is the Stars and the Wild. The Stars just eliminated the Wild today, winning that series in 6, winning Game 6 5-4. After going up 2-0 in that series, and then 3-1, they were unable to kind of have the killer instinct right away. And then even today, they were up 5-3 and ended up it was 5-4. The Wild scored a goal, and then I think they almost I wasn't able to catch the game, but didn't they almost have a goal that tied the game up near the end?
It was like an inch, or it was like a centimeter from crossing the line.
Yeah, so the Stars, the Wild were able to expose some holes in the Stars, and so do you think? Let's just for a moment. Let's pretend. I don't want to make any assumptions. I don't want people to think we're making assumptions. But let's pretend Blackhawks win Game 7. What do you think that you would be most nervous about with a Stars series for the Blackhawks?
The thing that I would be most nervous about with the Stars in a Blackhawks series is the Stars, like with the Blues, the Stars pressuring Blackhawks bottom defensemen into mistakes with speed. That's sort of how they dominated the regular season matchup to an extent. But the thing is, I don't know how. I feel like it'll be a really high-scoring series because you saw Dallas. You mentioned how it was a killer instinct thing. I think it was just more an indictment on an awful, awful Dallas defense and really bad goaltending, really average goaltending by Kari Lehtinen. I've said it a lot in the past few weeks. I don't really care that the Stars went up 4-1 on the Blackhawks in the regular season series because I see games like that. And I see games like last night where the Blackhawks played against the Blues and dominating the Blues from the second period on. And I see the Dallas defense and goaltending. that sustains me. That makes me think that the Blackhawks can have like this playoff check-in that can adjust to them, and is long, and they can take advantage of. I mean, because it's bad for all the railing we do on the Chicago defense, on guys like how slow Seabrook's been and how TVR's been up until last night. Like the Dallas defense is just an absolute tire fire, Adam. It's just an absolute tire fire.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that I was going to talk about the goaltending. I think that, the thing about hockey that's so weird is that you can be the best possession team, but, good goaltending is like the ultimate trump card in hockey. Satchel said that the other day where you can get, I think it was the other day, I shouldn't say, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. The other day, the Islanders were out-attempted by the Panthers in Game 5. They had the Islanders had a 39% score-adjusted Corsi share, 39%, and they won the game in overtime. Like did not deserve the win, but their goaltending was better than the Florida goaltending, and they won the game. Good goaltending can be the ultimate trump card in hockey. And I think that no matter who wins the series between the Blackhawks and Blues, either team has a huge advantage in goaltending over the Stars, and that will be key. And I truly think that whoever wins Game 7 between the Blackhawks and Blues will end up in the Western Conference Final against the San Jose Sharks. That's kind of my hot take there. I don't even know if you want to consider it hot, but there's my podcast hot take is that the Sharks will be in the Western Conference Final, and the winner of Blackhawks Blues will be in the Western Conference Final. Because I just don't trust, as much as, like you said, as much as the Stars dominated the Blackhawks this year, I don't trust that Stars goaltending against the Blackhawks in a 7-game series, and I don't know how the Stars series will get with the Blues this year. But should the Blues beat the Blackhawks, I don't trust that goaltending, especially against Vladimir Tarasenko, because that motherfucker is good.
I look at the Stars like this. They're the Blackhawks defensively, but without Duncan Keith, Nicholas Hjalmarsson, and Corey Crawford in net. That's the key difference.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they have John Klingberg, who's very good.
Very good offensively, but then I see him just running around like he doesn't know. I mean, he was pretty bad in that, almost surrendering the lead for Dallas today, as he was in Game 5 in Minnesota's win. So Klingberg is good offensively, but he has room to work on his defensive game. I'll say this, my hot take: if the Blues win, and knock on wood that they don't, they will lose to the Sharks in the Western Conference Final. If the Blackhawks win, the Blackhawks will beat the Sharks in 7 games in the Western Conference Final. If that's what happens, that's my hot take for today.
That's an early prediction there from Robert. I'm not gonna follow in suit because I'm gonna wait. But depending on what happens, we'll transition into a closeout here. Depending on what happens tomorrow night in Game 7, that we will probably, should the Blackhawks win Game 7, we will have a midweek podcast coming up. We'll look to get a Stars guest on again to preview the Stars Blackhawks series. Should they lose, we'll probably just wait until next week for a
For a funeral eulogy. We won't need that there. Yeah. Listen, Adam.
For our obituary podcast.
Last time we said you questioned whether there was going to be another playoffs podcast.
There was.
Say it again, because there was, and say it again. Say it again. Do the reverse jinx again. Question if there's going to be another playoffs podcast. I'm saying there will be, and I need you to question against it. That is a superstition.
I don't know. I just don't know. Will there be another playoff podcast? Who knows?
That's perfect. That's perfect.
One person who knows. One person.
Who's that?
God.
I don't think God's paying attention to the National Hockey League playoffs, but
he knows everything. So I'm sure God knows who's going to win tomorrow. He already knows, but that's a different conversation for a different day. Let's transition out of this bad boy. This has been the Second City Hockey Ice Cold Podcast. My name is Adam Hess. You can follow me on Twitter @_Adam Hess. His name is Robert Zaglinski. You can follow him on Twitter @RobertZEG Linsky. Thanks for listening. We continue to see more positive feedback on this podcast, and we appreciate all of it. If you have listened even once, we appreciate that. We're growing every week. We get more listeners and downloads, so we thank you for that. This has been the Second City Hockey Podcast. Follow our work on secondcityhockey.com. Follow Second City Hockey on Twitter at 2ND City Hockey. And let's go Blackhawks. And hopefully we will see you for another playoff podcast. But who knows if we will. This could be the last one.
We will be. We'll be staying classy.
Dude, prayers up. Prayers up. Anyway, this is Adam Hess signing off for Robert Zaglinski. This has been the Second City Hockey Ice Cold Podcast. Stay classy, everybody.